I want to talk during the holiday season and to this group here about the power of purpose and the lessons I've learned about this and having a reason to get up in the morning, which is what purpose is. I've been studying it now for 4 decades, and I'd like to share with you a few simple lessons that I hope will be useful in life, work, and during the holiday season. So the question really of purpose is, why do you get up in the morning? You can look at it and have all kinds of other definitions, but what we know is this. If you don't have a clear reason to get up in the morning, you don't live as long, you don't heal as quickly, you're not as happy, and you're not as productive. Yet, we know that this is fundamental. People need money in life, they need medicine or health, and they need meaning. We need daily bread, money, and we need daily meaning, both. And now we know that meaning is fundamental. And here's why. But before we look at the here's why, this amazing thing, according to the Center for Disease Control, only 1 out of 3 people has a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning. 1 out of 3 people. So just look at the person on your left for a minute here and see if they look like they had a good reason to get up this morning. If they look pretty good, look at the person on your right. So, if they both look pretty good and look pretty solid, then you're the 1 out of 3. So we need money, medicine, meaning health, and meaning. I gave a talk right down the block here at 3M Company recently, and they thought I made the 3 M's up for them, money, medicine, and meaning. But I said, no, it's the 3 fundamentals of life in many ways. So I write books, I read books, and I go to bookstores all the time. And I was in a bookstore recently in Denver, Colorado, a really cool independent bookstore called The Tattered Cover. And I walked in, and I go into bookstores all the time and see what's going on and see if they're selling any of my books, of course. But I went to the lady at the desk who, right inside the door and in this bookstore, and I said, can you tell me where the self-help section is? And she looked at me and she said, well, if I tell you, won't that defeat the whole purpose? A lot of people today seeking guidance, but what I'm talking about here today is not self-help. What I'm talking about is self-realization. It's really realizing what we're here to do on this planet with the gifts that God gave us. That's what the power of purpose is really all about. So why is it important? I want to give you a purpose checkup today at lunch. Like you might take your car in for a checkup, or you might go for a financial checkup, or you might go for a medical checkup. How about a meaning or a life checkup today for a few minutes? So allow me to take you on that path. But let me first suggest why I think this is important, why a meaning checkup is fundamental. First of all, I've been studying aging and life for many, many years. I started way back in the 70s to interview people over the age of 65. Because throughout the decades, throughout the centuries, throughout thousands of years, we've learned from elders, sat around the fire with elders. Where are the elders today? Where are the fires? So I sat around, not necessarily fires, although sometimes, but I interviewed people over the age of 65, and I asked them this. 65 used to be the retirement age. Now people are not retiring or retiring later or retiring earlier. There's a lot of, but I asked them this question: if you could live your life over, what would you do differently? What have you learned? What are the lessons we can all learn from you that have walked the path ahead of us? And these are the 3 themes that I've learned over and over again. Every time I write, I do another segment of interviews with people. I'm 72 now, so I think I'll bump 65 up to a later age. But here's the 3 themes. Number 1, People said, if I could live my life over, I'd be more reflective the second time around. Reflective means that they would push the pause button, step back, and look at the big picture. And I said, well, why did you do this, or when did you do this, or why didn't you? And they said, well, I did reflect, but it was usually during a crisis, a health crisis, a financial, a work, a relationship. Then I had to stop and look at the big picture. I think today, in an age of technology, everybody's on their mobile phone. I don't know about your table, but there were some at my table, which is okay. That's life today. But so much of life, we're struggling with hurry sickness, always going somewhere, never being places, and letting technology hijack the human moment. We need to pause during this holiday season and reflect and turn it off and connect. Secondly, people said if they could live their life over, they would be more courageous. They would take more risks the second time around. And I grew up right here. I'm a homeboy. I grew up right here in St. Paul. And so taking more risks, we were more about security than we were about risks. But the risks that people were talking about were career risks and relationship risks. Not necessarily physical and financial, but they said that where they got their greatest sense of joy and pleasure and their greatest pain was in the area of work and relationships. And they said, you know, I didn't have a lot of choice, I didn't think, but I wish I spent, and you spent, most people spend 60% of their life working. Whatever that is, it's the biggest number, the largest block of their most precious currency, their time, 60% working. And so to do something just to have it be a job, which I'll talk about in just a minute, just for daily bread, without daily meaning, is a fairly tough road to follow. So that's one of the things that they said. Third thing they said, every single person that I've ever interviewed said they want their life to matter, period. Mattering matters. Humans need to be needed. There's been many studies, and I've been part of these studies, where you see older adults who aren't needed tend to die prematurely by 7 to 10 years. If not having a reason to get up in the morning, it's not just about self, it's about others. It's about purpose and impact and making a dent, leaving a footprint, etc. It's also about health. I wrote a book, a new edition of a book called The Power of Purpose, and the reason I wrote the new book was that I had been visiting the neuroscience labs and the healthcare sites around the country to find out what purpose had to do with aging and health. And what I found in many of these places, I'll give you one example, and that is a neurologist by the name of Dr. Majid Fatui, who's at Johns Hopkins, who wrote a book called Boosting the Brain, said to me this. He said, Richard, imagine a pill that would reduce the effects of Alzheimer's significantly, that would reduce macroscopic stroke by as much as 40%, that would improve sleep and sleep apnea. And he went on and on. Imagine a pill like that. What would you pay for that? And I looked at him and I said, I don't think, a lot. And he said, well, it's free and it's purpose. And he said, we need to start prescribing purpose to our patients. Having a reason to get up in the morning, being needed, being connected is fundamental. So let me give you a default purpose right now. So if purpose seems too big and to get your arms around, let me give you the default purpose that you can walk away with. So nobody can walk out of here saying, I don't know what my purpose is, because I'm going to give you one right now. Now, this isn't yours, obviously you're going to make this your own, but it's this. It's to grow and give. That's it. Fundamental. Every day, if we grow and we give, that's a purposeful life. I looked at St. Thomas's mission statement, and I love it. I love the St. Thomas mission statement, and I love the last ending line where it says, to work skillfully to address the common good. Now, if you take that seriously, as a lifelong learner, to work skillfully to address the common good, That's the power of purpose. That's what I'm talking about. It's right in the St. Thomas mission statement. But the key is, how do we practice it? How do we live it on a day-to-day basis? So I said I'm a local boy. One other thing that I want to share with you is very local to me. I grew up in St. Paul. I used to write my term papers at the James J. Hill Library up the street here, not too far from here. And I was giving a talk about 20 years ago in northern Minnesota, way up at a conference center, and I got a call, and this was pre-mobile phone, and someone walked right up, like now, to me and handed me a slip of paper and said, "Call home now." And I said, "You mean like now?" And they said, "Now." I called home, and I found that my mother was in St. Joseph's Hospital, right over here. She had had a stroke. She was 78 years old. She had a stroke. She was in a coma. She wasn't expected to live through the night. And I was advised that if I wanted to see her again, I better come home right now. So I had about a 4-hour drive, and all of a sudden, you know that there's an ending coming like this. The music sounds different on the radio. The sun was going down. It was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and the day, all of a sudden, all this emotion came through. And I got to the hospital, St. Joseph's, about 11 o'clock at night, and I was escorted into my mother's room by the nurse who was on call in intensive care. And she was taking big, big breaths with her eyes closed. And I asked the nurse to walk out and close the door, and I lost it. And I just didn't know what to do. And so I did what I think was the most common sense thing to do. I just got up the bed, and I picked her up and held her, and I looked in her eyes, and I said, "Thank you. It looks like it's time to go." And when I said thank you, she opened her eyes and took 2 more breaths and died right there in my arms. And I tell you that story because I think it's about what we're all here about. Mattering matters. And I learned more about this purpose thing in that nanosecond, because this purpose thing that's in your mission statement and in our lives, it's fundamental. It doesn't weigh anything. You can't always see it, but when it's gone, you know it. And when it's there, you know it as well. My mother mattered, and her fundamental purpose was around family and kids. In that era, that's what she was about. And every one of us has a choice. So let me share with you 3 elements of purpose that are fundamental to us. Number 1, purpose is a choice. It's a choice about how we want to live our lives and what our mindset is. And I learned this from a man named Viktor Frankl. How many of you have heard of Viktor Frankl before? Yeah, I would expect in this audience. Well, Viktor Frankl, I met in 1968, right after I got out of graduate school. I met him, Julie, in San Diego. He was doing the seminar there, and I was fresh out of graduate school, trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. You'd think in counseling psychology you'd figure that out. Well, it's always about somebody else. So anyway, I spent a week with Viktor Frankl, and it changed my life forever. You've all had fortuitous encounters with other people in your life where you cross paths with them, and all of a sudden, the game changed. You got a new perspective on self, life, etc. And this happened for me. For those of you who don't know, Frankl wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which our U.S. Library of Congress claims is one of the most influential, one of the 25 most influential books in American history, Man's Search for Meaning. And what he said was this: because Frankl wrote that book after being in a series of 4 Nazi concentration camps, at the very height of his work in what he called logotherapy or meaning therapy, where he was training resident doctors in Vienna, Austria, he was taken, and his whole family was taken by the Nazis, and his family perished, every one of them. But he survived. He was liberated from Auschwitz. He weighed 87 pounds. He couldn't see very well. He had a lot of challenge, a lot of issues. But he went home to Vienna, and he healed, and he sat down and wrote Man's Search for Meaning in 9 days. And the essence of Man's Search for Meaning and what he learned in the concentration camps was this: The last of the human freedoms is choice. It's to choose what you want your life to be about, regardless of the circumstances. Now, the circumstances, obviously, in a concentration camp are horrific. But he said you could get up and give somebody else a kind word, a hug, a crust of bread, hope, and that will help keep them alive. And he said the people who tended to survive oftentimes had that sense of purpose, that reason to get up in the morning beyond themselves, beyond their own self-absorption. And so Frankl said to me, and he said to us in this small group, he said, don't ask what your purpose in life is. Ask this: what is life asking of me today? That's the message, I think, in Christmas in many ways. What is life asking of us? What are we supposed to do here with our gifts? The gifts that we all have within us in many ways. So purpose is a choice. Secondly, purpose is an aim about what we want that life to be about. And I was telling my new friend here from Uganda, and we were talking a little Swahili here at the table, that I didn't get to this story, so I'll finish it now. But I've been leading walking safaris in Africa for 3 decades. I went over there as part of the board of directors of Outward Bound, and I fell in love with East Africa, with Tanzania and Uganda and Kenya, and I've been going back ever since and created a foundation over there and things like this. But I was sitting around the fire with a hunter-gatherer elder. You know, the hunter-gatherers have been around for 70 to 100,000 years. They call them the original people. And this tribe is called the Hadza. And you can see them on National Geographic or whatever, so I've been working with them through our little foundation now for about 15 years. So I'm sitting around the fire with one of the Hadza elders, and his name happens to be Kampala. However, he's never been to Uganda. He's never been more than 25 kilometers from where we're sitting around this fire. And he said, and I'm interviewing him about how do you become a wise elder and in his culture and all of this. And he's getting a little tired of my interview, and he says to me, do you mind if I ask you a question? And I said, sure, go ahead. And he said, Richard, do you know what the 2 most important days in your life are? And I said, I don't know, what would you answer? You can think about that. I said, birth and death. And he went, oh, geez. You came all the way over here on an airplane. You came all the way out here in a Land Rover. You've sleeping in that nice tent over there and carrying that nice pack. And I said, well, what are the 2 most important days? He said, birth and surviving birth for us is one. And the second most important day is the day that you determine why you were born. And he said, the only way we have survived 100,000 years as a hunter-gatherer culture is through common good, through sharing. And sharing not only our food and our security, but our gifts with each other. And I thought, wow, I've studied this purpose thing across the planet, and here I'm sitting with a guy who has never been more than 25 kilometers from here, who's an elder who's saying exactly the same thing. Purpose matters. So the third thing and final thing, so purpose is a choice. Purpose is an aim for how we want to use our gifts for the sake of others. And what we know is this, particularly during the holiday season, and that is isolation is fatal. Going it alone is really a bad idea. I learned this at the Mayo Clinic, where I've been working for a number of years. Send someone back from the hospital, from a healthcare situation, and if there's no one home, they don't do so well. If there's someone there, even a pet, and I don't mean to dismiss pets as lower, but cats, dogs, etc., they do better. Isolation is fatal. During the holiday season, or any time, we can be in a room like this and feel isolated, feel alone, feel that people don't get us in certain ways. And so listening is imperative during these times like this to overcome that isolation. Finally, the third thing. So we've got first is purpose is a choice. Secondly, purpose is an aim, what we want ultimately our life to be about. Kind of the goal of our goals, the legacy, you could say in certain ways. And third, purpose is a practice. It's not a big concept on the wall someplace or in a mission statement. It's practiced day to day. And I always say purpose is a verb. It's an action in the world. I've had the pleasure on several occasions to meet with the happiest man in the world. Now, if you Google happiest man in the world, the name will come up, Matthew Ricard. Mathieu Ricard is a Frenchman who was a scientist, PhD scientist by training, who in his late 20s left Paris, France, where he lived with his esteemed family, mother an artist, father a scientist. And he went to India on a spiritual quest, a spiritual odyssey. And he never came back. He stayed and studied Buddhism, became a Buddhist monk, became a translator for the Dalai Lama, and became a spiritual practitioner, and in many ways, they call him the happiest man in the world because in these neuroscience labs, they hook him up and they do MRIs and everything, and he's lit up the pleasure center of the brain more than anybody they've ever measured. That's why they call him the happiest man in the world, and he's not very happy about it. Why is he not happy about it? Because he said, what constitutes happiness is practice. When I asked him, how do you get to be the happiest man in the world? He turned and looked at me on now 3 occasions and said one word, practice. And I said, you've got to give me more to go. But he said, it's about practicing compassion. It's about bringing who you are to what you do, regardless of the situation you're in. Same message from Viktor Frankl, same message from the neuroscience labs. Practice, what it means is this. They say that knowledge is only rumor until it's in the muscle. You know, we can all have ideas about purpose, but when it's in the muscle, it means it's in practice. You get up in the morning and you do that. You get up in the morning to grow and to give. If you put a little Post-it on your mirror and just wrote the words grow and give on it, try it tomorrow. Try it tonight. Write grow and give and put it on your mirror. And when you wake up in the morning, ask yourself, how am I going to grow and how am I going to give today? And at the end of the night, at the end of the day, before you go to sleep, ask yourself, how did I grow and how did I give today? I guarantee you'll be on the purpose path to a more fulfilling life in many ways. So let me finish here by giving you the purpose checkup. And the purpose checkup is a very simple formula. And it's a formula that I've been studying along with many others for 4 decades. And it has only 3 letters to it. And the formula is G plus P plus V. G, the letter G, which stands for gifts, your natural enjoyed talents, your God-given natural talents, the things your hand turns to naturally, the things you love to do, that you love to bring to others. P stands for passions or interests or curiosities, the things that you're curious about. If you got up in the morning and used your gifts, your naturally enjoyed gifts on the things you really cared about, that you were passionate about, now you got a reason to get up in the morning. And the V stands for values. Values are where you do what you do, the culture you do it in, the fit with you where you go. So I'm asking yourself, are you using your gifts on things you care about in an environment that fits who you are? It doesn't matter what your age is. This is a cradle-to-grave formula. And it's there in retirement, and it's there earlier in life, and it's there when you have your midlife crisis, when you're starting to pause and look back at the past and look at the future. And the formula G plus P plus V equals C, equals calling. I believe everybody is called to bring their best here, just like with the Hadza, how they fit in the second most important day in life. Is your calling? Are you answering the call? That's the message of the power of purpose. So that's the purpose checkup, when people are doing that. And I call it the Got a Minute School of Coaching, because people in my business who claim they have something to say about purpose, people will come up and say, Richard, have you got a minute? Can you tell me what I should do with the rest of my life? And I'll say, well, if you only got a minute, write down the formula on a napkin. And I got that idea from Delta Airlines. I travel a lot, and I travel because I'm hostage to Delta because that 80% of the flights are here. But if you ever travel on Delta, you'll notice their napkin. This isn't a pitch for Delta, but it's just a reality. On the napkin that you get when you get your beverage, whatever it is, it says a place to spill your drink and spill your thoughts. So I'm sitting next to someone on Delta, and he says, Richard, you got a minute? Can you tell me what I should do with the rest of my life? And I said, well, if we only got a minute here, and I'm an introvert, I don't like to talk to people on planes, I like my own space, but I said, you got a minute? Write down this formula on your napkin. And I found out it was a life changer for him. It gave him a very simple mental model to think about his life, his gifts, his passions, his sense of purpose. So I want to end by saying thank you. Thank you, Julie, for inviting me here. Thank you for the privilege of your listening, the generosity of your listening. And let me just end in two ways. Number one, to say my purpose is to help people unlock their purpose. I don't think it's something we have to discover out there. I think it's something in here. And it's that in here that we need to listen to and discern the call. And the holiday season right now is the perfect time to be doing that and to be listening to others. It's the greatest gift you can give to another human being, is to listen to who they are and help them get who they are. So let me end with my favorite quote about purpose. It comes from the American essayist E.B. White. And E.B. White said this. He said, I arise in the morning, torn between a desire to save the world and a desire to savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day. Well, in all due respect, I think a fulfilling life and a fulfilling holiday season is about both saving and savoring. That's the balance we're all looking for. Thank you very much.